Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the new edition of Before the Punchline Comedy Podcast. My name is Kirill Voronin. I'm, as usual, your host. And my guest today is actually a very special guest because those of you who have already listened to the show before, you probably know that I mostly sit down and talk to the English-speaking comedians based here in Moscow who devote a lot of their time to improving and developing the English comedy in this country and in this city in particular. But my guest today is a very special one. Like I said before, he is an award-winning comedian residing in New York City, USA. He has performed at most of the major venues in New York, such as Broadway Comedy Club, Eastville, The Pit, and Magnet Theater. One of the creators and hosts of a very unique variety show called Good Joke, Bad Joke, Bingo. He's also a co-host of a morning news parody show called Stoner Morning Show. He also accidentally wrote the best 10-minute set of his life and got it recorded as a mini album. And we will definitely get that covered on tonight's show. And also, like he says, he wants to dream like a young man with the wisdom of an old man. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest tonight is Shawn Wickens. Welcome to the show, man.
Damn, Kirill, I do feel special. That's maybe the best intro I've received.
Dude, you know, like when you texted me and approached me like about doing this show, I was like, okay, I need to do some research. And as I was studying all the info about you, I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna talk to Shawn. You know, we're gonna discuss things with Shawn. And then like I read your credentials list, and I'm like, you know what? I should probably call him Mr. Wickens because that list of credentials does not work out for me calling you by your first name only.
Well, I'm happy to be a father figure, or somebody to look up to.
Well,
you can call me Shawn. You can call me Shawn.
All right, thanks, man.
Yeah.
So, like I said, this is a very special episode for me because you are the first person that I sit down and talk to who doesn't live in Moscow, in Russia. Yeah. Yet you are a professional comedian, but unlike most of the today's comedians, who get into comedy, comedy was not your first choice of profession, because as I understand, you started off as an actor and you've been acting for quite a while, right?
Kind of. I got started first as a writer, and then I did improv comedy before stand-up comedy. So it was always comedy, but also it was improv is a different speed of comedy. It's, a team sport. You're collaborating with people on stage, and it kind of got me out of like a stage fright sort of mode, being, having the safety of having other people around. But I've always been fascinated with comedy, but I'm also kind of like a Renaissance person, as you said. I do like the Stoner Morning Show, which is just, friends, stoners having fun, having conversations with random, interesting people. But yeah, I'm out there. I'm doing a lot of different things.
Do you remember your first set that you did on stage, like as your first show that you've ever did?
I don't really remember the first jokes that I told when I got on stage. I actually did try stand-up years and years ago before I did improv, and it didn't work out well. But I remember when I very recently, within the last 5 years, transitioned from improv to stand-up. I remember the jokes that I told there because they were mostly stories. I did a storytelling show. And in telling stories on stage, because I used to be somebody who told myself that I couldn't write jokes. I was somebody who was funny in the moment. I could be funny in like an improv setting, but I really thought I didn't know how to write jokes. But I tried writing a storytelling show, and I realized that the way my brain works, I was quickly trying to embellish and make the stories funnier. So that's how I found out how to write jokes. I found out that a lot of jokes are stories that have been very edited down to their essential parts. And
that's usually,
and now we're here.
yeah, that is actually a very pretty accurate description, because the way that we workshop with a couple of my friends comedians in Moscow is that we get together, and one by one we get on stage, like on so-called stage, yeah, and we have stories and we tell these stories, and then we try to find the funniest parts, the funniest bits in these stories. And then we're like, okay, so now we need to work on this. Now we need to make it shorter, cut out all the unnecessary stuff, get to the punchline as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And so essentially, a joke is always a story. It always is. Like in your case about that joke about soup. I'm still under impression of that. Like, this is just, I've never heard anything like that. I mean, there are a lot of comedians who just get like a 10 or 15 minute story and then they go off of it. Yeah, like and on different topics, like oh my god, like Jim Jeffries' last special, the best 15-minute bit about shit that I've ever heard in my life. Like,
oh yeah,
really, yours is probably the best bit about soup I've ever heard in my life.
Thanks. Like you said, we'll talk more about the album later, but yeah, that's like a story about a dream. And I don't know, it was like, it's easy to embellish a dream because it's not real anyway. Like, how is it lying if you're, a dream is a story that your subconscious mind creates and makes up out of nothing. And if you consciously embellish a dream, it's not really lying. It's just a different form of creation. I guess.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. So you transitioned, like you just said, from an improv performer to a comedian.
Yes.
And
is there a lot of improv in Moscow?
There is. There are actually at least two groups, two organizations that I know do improv, and some of those guys actually come to our shows and they try doing stand-up.
Oh, yeah.
Their problem is exactly what you've just talked about, is that they tend to tell long stories, and that is the problem. Long stories are okay when you're doing an improv, because the format tells you to do that.
Yeah.
But in stand-up, the audience doesn't actually forgive you for like getting to the punchline for too long if you don't put like funny parts in between that. So based on that, how difficult was a transition for you personally from improv to being a full-time stand-up comedian? And what was the most difficult part that you had to fix in your comedy persona?
Yeah. Well, I'll start out with the best thing, which was that I never got paid to do improv, which was always very frustrating to me. And it was something that I enjoyed doing and I loved doing. But I really felt it devalued the art form that nobody in New York figured out how to make money from doing improv. Not even just a living, just like make money from doing shows, So stand-up it felt more valuable because instead of making stuff up and just sort of being goofy on stage, I was really now speaking truth and saying what I really wanted to say. And I was getting paid to do it. So that was the best parts of it. And sort of I guess the worst and hardest parts about it is it's a weird competitive aspect of human nature that a lot of my improviser friends, it seemed that they felt slighted by the fact that I was moving away from improv, not rejecting improv, just like adding something else besides improv to what I was doing. So that was difficult. And then even, there was a learning curve to do stand-up well. I think that I did excel at it quicker than somebody just trying it for the first time without an improv background. I was definitely comfortable on stage. I didn't have to find my voice, so to speak. But I did have to refine really what I did want to talk about. and figure out the jokes and stories that were most successful for me to share.
Oh, that's very great. This is how you're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
When you're just starting off. Was the time limit for your sets a problem for you? Because improv gives you much more time on stage than stand-up shows. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
That especially in the United States, I read some horror stories what people would do to get some time on stage. Like they would clean bathrooms, they would do the tickets and stuff like that. Even work as bouncers at the shows just to get some time on stage.
Yeah.
In Moscow, it's if we talk about like Russian stand-up, because Russian stand-up is big here, and I remember, because I've been mostly doing English stand-up. I've been doing this for 5 years, and it's only been mostly English. But when I tried to transition to Russian last year, I did a couple of shows. That's crazy because the competition is so big and the quantity of the comedians is so big that we had a show, or the first open mic, a Russian open mic that I did, was 32 comedians.
Yeah, that's too much. Yeah.
On the list.
Right.
And there was a condition that if you want to perform, you had to bring 2 friends with you.
Oh, wow.
Who had to stay there till the end of the show, or else you'll be banned from participating at the show.
My God.
And I was like number 21 on the list. So that didn't do me any favors. But the problem was that they don't even give you 5 minutes. Initially, they give you 3 minutes. And if you're funny, they give you 5 minutes. And the problems there also is and always will be that there are some guys who do TV in Russia, and those guys always get more time than any other comedians. Yeah, they get like 10 or 15 minutes even, and you have to sit there and you're like, okay, fuck, now I'm going after that guy. So that's not going to be nice. So
I love watching comedy. I mean, this is a quick aside. I love watching comedy, but if I am on the show, I don't enjoy watching comedy. You know what I mean? It's like too nerve-wracking. And it's not even that I get upset if somebody does great. I would rather take the stage in a hot room rather than go up after somebody who bombs. I mean, I'll do either. But it's hard for me to get in the zone sometimes if I'm watching other people perform. You know what I mean? I just like to be very chilled out and relaxed and not really thinking or talking or hanging out. I just like to really get in like a chill zone before I get up on stage. It's kind of hard to do sometimes if you're watching other people perform.
There is this problem as well here because at the comedy club where we usually perform in English, there is no green room.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. It's like a full room of people, because our comedy club is basically like a little basement, which fits about 50 to 70 people. And like the shows that we get sold out, there are like 50 people in there and like 5 comedians, and you're pacing back and forth somewhere in the background and you just can't focus.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is the most difficult thing. Yeah, but back to the question, like, was it a problem for you time-wise to deal with how much time you would get initially once you got on stage?
Not really. I think it was kind of a gift to be able to do open mics here in New York and, where there are like, back when I was starting out, there were like 40 to 50 a night in New York City. I think it was useful for me to have a time limit of the first 3 minutes to 5 minutes because it really allowed me to focus on just 1 or 2 bits that I was trying out, and even though, I kind of misrepresented myself a little bit when I said like, oh, I was comfortable on stage. It was still nerve-wracking even to just do 3 minutes of solo performance on stage, because it is a different feel and vibe, but it wasn't excruciatingly like soul crushing like it was like years ago when I first tried. I was able to pick myself. I had bombed at improv before, which is funny to talk about bombing at improv. And I picked myself up from that. So like picking myself up from bombing, telling jokes, it was easier. And it's not fun to bomb, but bombing has taught me more about how to make my material more than doing well. You know what I mean? I've never learned that much about jokes by telling them well. It's fun to tell them well, but telling a joke poorly really usually teaches you how to tell it better.
No, definitely. You ask me, I think that it is very important to get that experience of bombing on stage in front of several dozens of people, because and this is what usually happens. You know, I get to see some newer guys coming in and trying to do stand-up for the first time, and like the first show, they're doing more or less good, mostly because they came with friends who supported them.
Sure.
Then the second time is more or less also, but then the third, the fourth time, they will get eventually a crowd, which will be very difficult to make laugh, and they will be like, so like you could see every single time that the joke doesn't work and they start bombing, you could see like them dying inside on stage and crawling from it. And that is the big test, because after that initial test, it's the decision time. Like, do you want to continue or do you quit?
Oh, yeah.
And that's why, at least in Moscow here, it's as a rule, like if a person tries to do comedy, if that person doesn't quit within the first month, then they have a chance to actually do better in the future as a comedian.
I always think about sort of like the kind of how misleading it might be for people starting out to sort of watch too much professional comedy in a way. Because when you're just starting out and you're watching a lot of like hour-long specials, it can be almost it could give you a reason to feel bad about yourself, because you're so far away from being able to do even like a half hour that it could prevent you from progressing if you watch too much professional stuff and you don't see yourself as reaching that level quick enough, you know.
But I guess that but I agree with you here, and there is this thing that a lot of people who come to stand-up shows, even like in Russia, you know, even if they come to an English show, they are used to seeing all of these 40 minutes long specials, hour-long specials, 2-hour-long specials, and they think that, oh, you see, this is how it's done. You know, guys get on stage, they perform for 90 minutes, they kill, every single joke is landing,
right.
And you can't even make us laugh for like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But what they don't know is that it usually takes comedians like a year, 2, maybe even 3 to build that 90-minute set then to record a special.
Yeah. The other misleading thing, I think, is that, you know, when somebody releases a special, it's material that they've worked on for a year and perfected, and the special you're watching is probably 3 or 4 different tapings that have been edited together to show the audience the perfect set, which and professional comedians still bomb. Like, I think it would be amazing if somebody at the level of like Dave Chappelle or Jerry Seinfeld or Jim Jeffries released a special of them bombing to sort of show that it's, you know what I mean? Because it's like, even the big time people still bomb. Which I guess Jerry Seinfeld did that a little bit with that documentary Comedian.
Oh yeah, that was from 2000 or 2001, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I watched it. Yeah, I watched it as well. Yeah, and but I liked how he made this formula that, okay, it's a clean slate. Let's start from the beginning. Yeah, we basically just decided, fuck everything that I've done before. Let's do it. Let's do everything once again.
Yeah.
Only that he already had a name and he didn't have to work for like 10 to 15 years.
Right. Slightly easier, but yeah, it's good to break down and rebuild and start over again. You know. which is what we're doing in 2021, I guess, as a society.
Oh my God. Yeah, that is so true.
Yeah.
One other thing, since we started talking about bombing, this is one of the questions I usually ask people. What was your worst moment on stage as a comedian?
It was, I felt pretty crushed during an improv show years ago when an ensemble that I was working regularly with, we started getting on a good streak of shows. We were even doing like festivals. We were a group of people who loved traveling, and we even started trying to book our own shows. We were one of the few times we were hired. We actually didn't make money. We were given gas money and lodging. So we just like broke even to travel, you know. But we did an hour-long improv set for like 200 people, and it was a charity event, and it was like a pretty big venue, and we bombed the whole show. It was like 8 people. It was 8 people on stage trying too hard to make the audience laugh, and we were getting in each other's way, and it was like so rough, and we couldn't run away from it. And we even were wearing wireless microphones. So our bombing was amplified throughout this, which, you know, it's the first time I had ever used a microphone for an improv show. Usually we were in smaller theaters. So it was like we were hearing ourselves bomb, and it was echoing in this huge venue. So that was pretty rough. But luckily nobody felt good about it. So we had that camaraderie of everybody feeling crushed. So it sucked, but we were there for each other, and we moved on, you know? But people paid a lot of money to see this show as a fundraiser, and nobody was happy.
That's probably the worst thing that you can think of, yeah. And I actually had that experience as well. I've told the story several times before that for me, there is one moment that stands out. That was the second time I did stand-up originally, and I tried it first in Russian. And my set was so bad that after one of the jokes, the host heckled me.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, so I always put that as probably the worst moment. But then there was another one a couple of years ago. We did a show that was the biggest English comedy show at the time in Moscow. We gathered like 300 people at one place. And the guys actually invited me to participate in that show. And first of all, I should have taken it much lighter because, you know, that wasn't me there. I dressed up for the occasion, and I usually don't do that. You know, I'm like t-shirt, jeans, that's it. But that time, for some reason, I decided to dress up. I put on a black shirt. I put white pants, so I look like a guy who would park your car, basically. And then once the host introduced me, I get on stage and I try to run there, you know, to rush as quickly as possible. And I trip. And everyone sees that. I trip, I fall on my knees. Everyone sees that. And in the middle, the first half was relatively good, but in the middle of that, I forgot a punchline. I had a setup and I forgot the punchline. And I was like, something like this, you know, and the other half, the second half was so bad. I was sweating like a whore in a church, and that wasn't very good. And what made things worse is that people actually paid also for that show, and didn't feel very good.
Yeah. It's not fun to feel like you don't belong in doing what you want to be doing. You know what I mean?
But plus, there is this also element when you get invited to finally do something big, and up until last year, that was a problem for me because I would do good at free shows, you know, at open mics, at some Friday shows where the comedians are handpicked. But then when I would get invited, I would get a spot. It's like a big paid show. I would always fall short. That had been haunting me for such a long time that I just couldn't get that one big moment for myself at a big show. And fortunately, I was able to break that curse eventually. But yeah, that doesn't feel nice. Not at all.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it's like you need to find the balance of the fear that you need to have prior to going on stage. You know what I mean? It's like you can't have so much that it cripples you, but I think you need a little bit of it to sort of like excite you, and sort of like you need to have the challenge there in some ways. Like if you get too cocky and think you're going to crush, it's almost like it sometimes sabotages you, because in some ways, I think the audience doesn't want to see a show where it's completely easy for you. I think they like knowing that there's a little bit of a challenge there, that there's a threat of failure that makes it more exciting.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, the audience always loves that. And one other thing that audience really loves in stand-up is actually improv. Because when in the middle of a set, let's say there is a heckler, yeah, and he like heckles, or something else happens, and a comedian reacts to that in a funny manner, and he is able to make that funny, the audience just bursts into like clapping, applauding, like laughing, just because they're like, oh shit, he just came on spot with that.
Yeah.
So that's actually pretty cool.
I think that is the magic of comedy sometimes. And like, I think a lot of times stand-ups want to craft the perfect joke and the perfect set, which is a great endeavor. But I think that it's a good strength to welcome those unplanned moments, because it's sort of, I think it's an acknowledgement of how great and powerful and strong comedy is. Like nobody can have a perfect 100% batting average for comedy. You know what I mean? Because it's like such a wonderful and special and precious thing. So you have to be open to those wonderful moments that you can't plan, because it's to not welcome that, I think, is to sort of make yourself greater than the magic of laughter in some ways, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah. So I've had improvisational moments on stage that I've been able to like, incorporate into the set. It's like, that's the new punchline. But I've also had moments that I can't replicate, and to try to replicate it would sort of like destroy the fun of those fun found moments.
Was it? No, let me actually rephrase that. There are, of course, people like you, for example, who come from improv to stand-up. That's not a new thing. There are a lot of you guys up there. But there are also a lot of comedians and who want to try and do improv at least once. So from your perspective, would it be useful if a just stand-up comedian who's never done improv before would go and do improv? Like, even if it's a small course or a couple of shows?
Yeah, I think it definitely is useful. And it's because I've talked to some stand-up comedian friends who have said, I can only do my written work. I can't divert from it at all, which I understand that feeling, but it's sort of like the nature of reality is that chaos happens, and like anything may and will happen during your set to derail you. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's to be afraid of having to adjust is a denial of reality almost. You know, it's sort of like,
I get it totally.
Yeah. And you don't have to excel at improv to learn from it. You know what I mean? I think just the trying of it is there's strength in trying it. You know what I mean? It's like running a marathon, which I've never done. But once you say, I have ran 26.5 miles, like other obstacles might seem easier for you. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. I'd agree with that. So one other quick question, I guess that it's not going to be quick, but still. I wanted to ask you about the comedy scene in the States in general, because a lot of people know that the USA is probably like a birthplace of modern day stand-up, where it all came from. How can a comedian get a push or a break, whatever you want to call it, in the States? Because like in Russia, for example, there are only two ways you can get your break here, on the comedy scene. It's either you are lucky enough to get at least on one TV show. Mm-hmm. But then again, there is a huge audition, and it's like 1 out of 100% that you might get it. Yeah. And the other one is you can become a regular at a comedy club, go there, perform for a year, become a resident of this club, and then hopefully the club will start booking you for different towns, cities, and that's how you basically get a break. Yeah. Everything else, not so much. How does it work in the States?
Well, those options definitely work here in the U.S. If you get on a TV show and you are funny, like the doors are going to open for you. But what I did, it was because it was so competitive, and also there was a moment where I felt like I had wasted so much time doing improv that I was like kind of mad at myself for not trying stand-up sooner. Because I even had friends who would watch me perform and say, you seem like more of a stand-up comedian than an improviser. Because I wasn't doing a lot of characters. I was just doing me being in a scene, you know what I mean? But what I did was I kind of went a sort of a DIY route, because I spent so much time doing improv, and I didn't want to spend so much time then now trying to break into regular things in stand-up. So I leveraged experience that I had with improv. I knew people who ran comedy festivals already. So I just started doing road shows at festivals, comedy festivals. And then I took that experience and started applying to just theater festivals. It's like, what's to say I can't do stand-up at a theater festival? I mean, that already happens at Edinburgh, you know?
Edinburgh Fringe Festival,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was doing that here in the States, and then once I got successful at that, I showed comedy clubs regionally outside of New York that, hey, I was already doing these shows at festivals, now I can do these shows at your club. So it was like a lot of incremental steps, but it was kind of just, in some ways, hearing the advice that other stand-ups would give everybody, which was work on your 5, work on your 10, work on your 15, work on your 30, try to open for successful people. That seemed like the long route, and it almost seemed like a dead end, because that's what everybody here in New York was doing. So I kind of just sort of told myself I would do road shows. I also had New York comedians say they would never perform for audiences outside of New York because they find that they're too edgy for outside of New York.
Wow. Okay.
Like horrible advice, because there's so much out there that, like, to see America as just New York and just not New York is a denial of just like how much, uniqueness is that exists out in the world. I had people tell me not to do corporate gigs, not to do private gigs, which is like, why are you telling me not to make money if those jobs make money? Yeah. So it was, in some ways, I felt like I had to do a lot of outside the box thinking for comedy, which is already an outside of the box endeavor. And then you find that once you get a little bit of success thinking outside of the box for other comedians, a lot of other comedians will then resent you for doing a way that was different than what they were told to do, it's so frustrating how frustrating comedy is sometimes. You know what I mean? This thing that is meant to bring joy and laughter and harmony and togetherness, but like people are so cutthroat about joy. It's so frustrating.
I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised how toxic the comedy community can be.
Yeah, that's true in New York, and that's also why I kind of wanted to avoid it. It was very sort of male dominated and right wing dominated, and it was just like I didn't want to. Like on one hand, you had comedians saying I don't want to perform for conservative audiences outside of New York City, but within New York City, it was dominated by kind of a conservative voice. So I don't know. It's hard to win, no matter what move you make.
Well,
Someone's going to be mad, no matter what you do. But,
well, definitely they will. And I even read and saw like some piece of info that there is a particular group of comedians in the States in particular who are not on TV. You don't find their clips on YouTube. Yeah, so they're basically unknown to the general audience, but they are very well liked and known among the so-called corporate gigs, because there are like those comedians who only do corporate gigs.
Right.
But they're like, gray cardinals of the comedy world, because nobody seems to know who they are, but
right.
They make a living doing that.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
and you would be hard pressed to get good advice from them on how to do it, because they won't give you the good advice that will create a competitor for themselves. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to tell you how to do it.
Yeah. And besides, I also heard that other comedians usually can't stand them.
It's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a factor of jealousy involved. Like it's hard to make money from comedy, and if you see someone else doing it, you're kind of upset by it. But also, comedians have a hard time liking comedians who have a style that's different from themselves. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, the competitive nature of the human race, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. We're coming closer and closer to one very interesting point of our discussion, and here is the so-called a step before that. Yeah, sure. We've talked about the comedy community in the States, yeah, and how it, from your perspective, yeah, but everything changed a year ago, almost to the day. When the pandemic hit, all the public places got on lockdown. And as far as I know, New York still has those restrictions, right? You can't organize public events with a lot of people in attendance, right?
Yeah, they started to lift restrictions a little bit, but it's still a different scene. Yeah.
You're unlucky with that. Moscow doesn't care. I mean, we've been open since July.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've had people coming to our shows, like 30, 40, 50 people a show, like since July. So, but not very safe, of course, but still. Okay. And those restrictions and the pandemic in particular changed the entire landscape of stand-up, yeah? But there was a way out, which was called Zoom, yeah, yep. And which then turned into online shows. Not only open mics, but also closed mics and even festivals. Mm-hmm. How have you found yourself during this time around, when you were just sitting at home and you're just basically relegated to doing shows online? How was that for you?
I was fine with it. I think I adjusted slightly. You know what I mean? I definitely went through the thoughts of, I had bigger thoughts of like, what am I doing? And is it worth trying to be funny in these times? Like I definitely went through that. But I was never sort of mad about doing online shows. I've also done some outdoor shows here and there, but I don't know. Comedy is a challenge. So if we're presented with a new challenge of having to do Zoom shows, we can buckle under that challenge or sort of rise to the challenge. And rising to the challenge doesn't mean you prefer doing this over live shows. It just sort of means that you're adjusting with the times, which I think we had to do as a society anyway. I mean, that's such a huge, longer conversation, but specifically comedy in the States, it's been a weird time where people complain about political correctness and people will say it's a bad time for comedy, which I've never believed. It's just a challenging time for comedy. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, if it's not the scene that you want it to be, that there's nothing you can do about it. You're just going to have to sort of accept it and improvise and change and move on, is what I think.
No, I agree with you, definitely. And for me, because we did some online shows as well before the restrictions were lifted. It was so much fun. I mean, at the time I was living in
it's still a release. It's still a release, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And so many fun situations. Like at the time I was living in the south of Moscow, and I was renting an apartment with my wife, and my wife was pregnant at the time. She was like 5 months pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And it was one. Thanks. It was, it was a 5-minute work. So.
Yeah.
And she was the one who was actually trying. So,
good.
Yeah, and so I remember like one of the first shows that we did. Like we rented a 1-room apartment, yeah. And so there she is lying on the bed, and she's like just into her phone. And there I am, like I had only a laptop and a USB mic at the time. Mm-hmm. I was like, damn, I need to put the laptop so the camera would catch me by here, by my chest.
Yeah.
I took my ironing board. I took a couple of boxes. I put it all together. I put the laptop atop, and I was standing there like the entire show, like just pacing back and forth, just drinking occasionally. But that also gave me a chance to perform, not physically, I guess, yeah, but digitally, outside of Russia. Oh. I did 5 shows, 5 online shows, 5 online open mics from the States, from the USA. I did one open mic in Tokyo, online open mic. But because I'm an idiot and I messed up the time, because the time zones are different.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just say that I had to wake up at 4 a.m. to participate at that open mic. But that was one hell of an experience, definitely.
Yeah. It's I'm reminding myself to see the silver linings, definitely, because it's been easy to see the dark clouds. There have been both, but some good and some bad. That's how it's always been, just different kinds of good, different kinds of bad.
Yeah, and finally we come to the probably most interesting point of our discussion. The best 10 minutes of my life. That's the name of your mini album that you recorded, as I understand, at one of the online shows, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and...
Yeah, it was a Zoom show that I recorded.
And you split it into 5 different bits, 2 minutes approximately, each of them lasts. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, very interesting and, in my experience, unique 10 minutes. Because, like we talked before we started recording, that I told you that this sounds like what a person locked at his home for like 6 months or even 12 months would write.
Definitely.
So let's go into discussing this and tearing it apart.
Sure.
How did you come up with all of this?
So it was an interesting moment of coming up with this material because, and I've discuss with other comedians that we all know, Carol, you and I both know the joy of coming up with a joke that just springs to you without trying to write a joke. Yeah. We all do the work to write jokes, but there's also times where inspiration happens and it's very exciting. So in the midst of an evening, I was home by myself. I was listening to music. I was a little stoned, I'll be honest. And I wasn't trying to think of funny things, even though funny is something that my mind is always sort of, it's on the back of my mind. But I came up with not one joke, but several ideas that I thought were very hilarious, and I thought all connected together very well. So I immediately started bragging on social media that night that I wrote what I thought was the best 10 minutes of my life. It was, I've done a lot of 10-minute sets in my career as a stand-up comedian, but I thought this was the most solid and unique and exciting and sort of strongly interconnected 10 minutes, more so than any other 10 minutes that I've ever written.
That sounds great, but like if we go into the details, of what of the bits that you wrote,
yes,
it all starts with a bit basically describing how you got so stoned once that you forgot that you were a comedian.
Yeah.
How much of a truth is there to this story, and how did you even, like, I wonder just how did you even come up with that?
Well, it's based on half-truth because I have done shows sober. I've done shows never drunk, but just with drinking. And then I have done shows stoned before. And I have been on stage stoned and forgotten my material and then had to sort of roll with it, but still found funny ways to be. I mean, that's why I do a show called Stoner Morning Show. It's because stoners are funny, and like, it's just funny to me to see stoners try to do a talk show. So that story is really based in reality, and I never thought about talking about it on stage. In some ways, I don't enjoy when comedians talk about being a comedian, but I think it is a funny, in this specific 10 minutes, I think it's a funny way to set up some of the trippy, stonerish things I eventually touch on. I plant the seed that I'm going to make you feel stoned in some ways by just introducing the feeling of being stoned at the very beginning of this 10 minutes.
That's what actually hooked me up on that one, because like in the middle of that, I was like, am I under psychedelic drugs right now? Because what is going on? Because I'm listening, and I remember like I haven't smoked even weed for like maybe 7 years. Yeah. Because it's freaking expensive and difficult to get in Moscow.
Yeah. That's a good reason to stop. I hear it.
Yeah. But yet, and I remember how I felt during that time. You know, like once the story that just stands out to me is we smoked some pot,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in the countryside, and like several miles from our countryside place, there is a gas station. So eventually you'd start wanting to eat something.
Sure.
And so we get in the car, we drive to the gas station, and there's like a burger place inside the station. So we order some burgers, we start eating them, and all of a sudden, like I don't know how we even noticed that, but I noticed a police car stopping right by the gas station, and the two cops come in, and like I'm sitting there, like I can't stop staring at them. I'm watching every single move. And at one point, one of my friends kind of pushes me with an elbow. He was like, "Eat your fucking food." and later he told me, it was like, "Dude, you at some point you were eating this burger and you haven't swallowed what you just chewed. And you just stopped, you opened your mouth, and you stared at those two cops for like 3 minutes without even blinking."
That's funny.
And I was like, okay, I guess I'm never smoking the Russian pot again.
It's so funny that we do have this natural inclination to sometimes do things that are bad for us. Like to be stoned and stare at cops is not the thing to do, but we still are gravitated towards it. I've been walking dogs as a side job in my neighborhood. And I recently saw I think this is a great example of this kind of human behavior in dog form. I was walking a dog, and we were in this grassy area, and it started eating goose poop. And it picked up this goose poop, started chewing it, gagged, spit it out, and then saw more goose poop, and then started to eat that. It was like, dog, what are you doing? It's this weird habit that all life forms seemingly have, where we want to feel something, so we even feel the things that are harmful for us.
It's like McDonald's and KFC, basically.
Yeah,
that's shit. Maybe that one is better, but I know it's shit as well. But still, let's give it a shot. Yeah. So that the first bit, definitely, it, like, you, with me at least, yeah, it resonated with me, and I think that you, at least with me as a listener, yeah, as a comedy fan, you achieved what you wanted to achieve, because I felt stoned as well.
yeah.
Like, I'm listening to this, and I'm like, and one other thing that I've noticed, like, while you were like delivering this bit, I was like, he's talking so beautifully. And I just, can you please go on, sir? I was just,
I have been told once in a while that I do have a nice voice, and I appreciate it. And I think the first track also works because I'm honest, but I'm also I'm kind of modest. I talk about a moment where I sort of fail, but I do turn that failure into a win. And because, because then I start bragging about how well I did in a moment where I forgot that I was a comedian. This whole naming it the best 10 minutes of my life is more braggadocious than I usually get in being a comedian. And that's why I do brag through it a little bit. I kind of feel that in naming it the best 10 minutes, I kind of do, in the midst of it, remind you at least how good I think this is. Just to prove that the title is worth it,
And you make several callbacks to this idea that this is how good I really am. Like, I think in every single bit, or at least in 3 of them, you do that. Yeah.
Well, I had comedian friends who kind of complained that I was bragging so much. So then I just tell them, well, I did make money in the recording of this album because I did sell tickets for the recording of it, and I made a little, nothing great, but I made a little money off of it. So it's sort of like, yeah, I deserve to call it that because it is at least, it's great.
No, look, man, me, I'm not only a comedian, I love comedy, I love comedy. So I love watching, listening to comedy.
In different forms. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And every single time that I see a person getting something interesting and unique out there, yeah, like this mini album, I will always be happy for that, this is something good, this is something great. Like, one of such examples I saw at a Russian stand-up show once. So there was a guy, and I had seen him before coming there 3 weeks in a row, and only like 2 of his jokes would work. Like, he would bomb most of the time. And then he comes in, and at the beginning of his set, and there are some audience members who are like, ah, shit, here we go again, this guy. And then at the beginning of the show, he goes like, I've written some jokes for you guys, and I'm gonna tell them to you. And if you laugh, great. But every single time you don't laugh, I'm gonna take one item of my clothes off.
That's funny.
And he did that. By the end of his set, he was down to his underwear. So that was hilarious. I thought just the idea, the guy knew that he wasn't very good and experienced at that time. He was like, you know what? Let me turn this around.
Yeah. And he gave himself a tiny win by sort of thinking outside the box. And I bet he improved. After he did that, if he performed one of the first 2 sets that he didn't do that well at, I bet they would have been slightly better because he would have known he would have had that sensation, that feeling, that memory that success is possible.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so the first one, we got done with that. The second one, which is called My Real Freaky Dream. I'll be honest with you. After I listened to this one, I was like, this is a script for Rick and Morty episode. Like this could easily be one of the Rick and Morty episodes.
Yeah. It does have sort of like alternate dimension feelings to it.
But what I liked about it is that it's like a short 2.5 minute story, and you tie that up so like you make the ends meet. You know, you start with one idea, then you go full circle, and you finish that. You know, so every single there is like a setup and punchline in like the climax. You know, like they use this term in literature, like climaxing. Yeah, this is what I heard here, and like I honestly, like by the end, I was like. I clapped like sitting in front of my PC because this was really good. And another reason why it resonated with me is because I've had several like similar situations before when I would have like a very weird dream, which even I would be remembering with a smile on my face. And like every single time that I would wake up after like a shocking ending to the dream, I'd be like, Is this like it? Is this like, oh, okay, am I? No. Oh, yeah, thank God. I'd grab my phone and check this, something like this. Yeah, so that was very good.
I still enjoy thinking about this album because of how sort of very interconnected everything is, because not only, so the macrocosm of this 10 minutes is that I wasn't really trying to write it in these ideas came to me. And one of the ideas was talking about a dream I had. So the microcosm connection is that I wasn't trying to have that dream. The dream also just happened. You know what I mean? And I, not to get too far ahead, but I think the dream then sets up the very next section very well, because I talk about the dream and the nature of reality and truth and lies. And then I talk about a lie that I sort of stumbled on or thought about. So I never, prior to this, I never really thought about the perfect set. I always really just thought about jokes I wanted to tell, you know, because I've done up to about like a half hour, 45 minutes on stage. And I was not worried about the perfect set. I'm really thinking about like a good 3 minutes, a good 5 minutes, a good 2 minutes, just like keeping the audience engaged, and then, you know, finding connections between things where I find them. But this was very unexpectedly for me, like a very connected, self-contained piece that I still do get excited about when I think about it.
No, that's the other thing that I wanted to tell you also, that I really liked this entire album for one more reason, is because whenever I go on stage, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, doesn't matter, I hate telling jokes which are not connected by one common story. You know, I always try to tell like one big story split into several jokes. And this is exactly what you've done here, because every single joke is logically connected to the previous one. Like when you're coming from this dream, you know, to the next beat about lying or telling the truth. And this, if you've, I swear to God, if you've done that, if you would do this in Russian, this bit in Russian, you would be like the king of comedy here, because there is such a thing, such a phenomena in Russian community, in comedy community right now, which is called post-irony. Basically, yeah. It's like when you can't tell whether a person is telling the truth, his honest opinion, or is he trying to bullshit you, you know? And this is exactly what it is, because take out the context of this being a comedy set, you know, and like just put you in front of me and we just start having conversation. If you start telling me this, I'm like, okay, like is he telling the truth? Because he sounds like he's telling the truth, you know, like this. And this is one of those things. But this dream bit, it ties so nicely to the next one, like the greatest lie in the world, which you dubbed it. Mm-hmm. And this, the title itself, it's such an oxymoron, to like everything that gets to the end of the joke. And I liked it very much because at the end you're like, you see, I didn't lie. I just shortened the whole story,
Right. There's like a lot of embellishments in what, like, calling it the greatest 10 minutes of my life is an embellishment. And like I do kind of admit to embellishment a little bit when I just in talking about dreams and sort of, I talk about truth and lies. And I even heighten within this 10 minutes. I start off talking about marijuana, cannabis, and then I talk about shrooms later on. That's a heightening of drug use, So it was fun to dream up and stumble on, and fun to record, and even fun to talk about.
Yeah, and one of the bits you have here is I'm on a date right now. Yeah, that's the bit. This is the bit that resonated with me because, and I don't think that this is something that I can be proud of, but for the past 5 years, every single girl that I've dated, my wife included, I would also take them. The first thing that I would do, I'm like, hey, do you want to come to a comedy show? Because I'm a comedian and I perform there. It's
smart for two ways, because I understand the feeling, the shame of it, but it's smart in two ways because you do need to bring people to the shows. But also it's smart to really lead with who you really are when you're meeting women, so they know who you really are. I'm currently sort of swiping on dating apps, and I'm not really trying to have that much success. I'm just sort of like putting myself open to meeting people, because life is opening back up again. But I'm really leading with an imperfect opening line. Women are asking me just sort of like, hey, what's up? What's going on? And I will respond by asking them if they know about any ayahuasca ceremonies that are happening in New York or in the area. Because I'm interested in doing it. I think it would be useful for me to sort of reset and rewire some things after this weird year. But it's sort of like anyone that I meet, I want them to know that I'm currently thinking about doing this because that's what I'm living through. That's the truth. So I've had quite a few women disconnect from me after that question, but it's sort of like I'm doing them a favor. I'm being honest.
Oh man, I used to do the same thing back in the day. So because my idea was like, all of these, how do you usually start the chat? It's always so typical. Hi, what's up? Yeah. I was like, I want to be remembered, even if it doesn't work out. So I was like, I need to come up with a question or something like that. So most of the women who I ended up dating, I would start the conversation by asking them, if you were a soup, what kind of soup would you be?
Yeah,
that's the question. Yeah, and when I actually texted my wife, I saw her pictures, and I texted her. I'm like, "Hi, are you a real ginger?" Like, that's what I asked her. It's just so stupid. She was like, "No, I dye my hair," and I was like, "Cool, I don't care. You look like ginger to me." Oh my god, yeah. So that was that. But one thing that I'm interested in, even though all of these bits are connected by basically your stoner experience, everything that comes together, all of these stories are different. Yeah, they have different setups, they have different situations, different circumstances. How did you end up putting all of that together? Because this is such a big contrast in all the situations here, all of these 5 parts.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to remember to put myself back at the exact creation of it, but I really think that I did come up with these ideas in reverse order. So I came up with the last track first, then the fourth one, then the third one, then the second one. And the first one was, it's an idea that I had always running around in my head, but I realized now is when I should tell it because it sets up all of the other stuff so well. So it kind of just happened on accident, which is also why I get very braggy about it. It's like, it felt so magical to not try to write something, but to have it come out so well. But to be honest, that couldn't have happened had I not previously sat down and tried to write something that worked out this well, you know? So it's like I had prior to this, I'd already done the work. And by doing the work and putting out the effort and trying, I opened myself for it to happen, for it to happen when I least expected it to.
You seem to take a very big pride in writing this, and rightfully so. But one of the reasons why I think you're so proud of that is like what you've just mentioned, yeah? Because this wasn't your typical sit down, grind, and write ideas set. Yeah, that was just something that came out of your head, just like that, yeah? And most of the comedians, of course, they do differently. They have an idea, they workshop this idea with other comedians, they sit down and write. This came out naturally. Yeah. For you, how much of a relief was that compared to a usual routine of just sitting and writing?
Yeah, it was a huge relief because it also answered the question in the way of, should I be doing this? Should I be pursuing comedy? Because things had changed. I mean, look, we talked about like the move to virtual and like how good or bad it was. I've been rolling with it, but I have been rolling through it in the midst of, what purpose does my voice have in the world? That kind of thing, like doubting that I should be pursuing something that I feel passionately about, that I want to pursue. You know what I mean? Those stupid self-doubt thoughts. So it was empowering to me as an individual who needed to laugh and needed to make myself laugh, but also needed kind of proof that I am that good.
Well, I think that this is what most of the comedians look for, actually. And this is one very interesting point that you just mentioned, and I think that I have to ask you this. Sure. You sound like before coming up with this mini album, yeah? You seem to be like at the crossroads for quite some time of, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? And that kind of stuff. So what led you to that? Because obviously it's got to be much more than just lockdown and not being able to perform in front of public and at different clubs. Yeah. So what led to this idea in your head?
Well, I did kind of, prior to the everything shutting down, I was coming off like a 4 or 5 month like comedy slump. And it didn't trigger any sort of, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? It triggered, do I deserve to be doing this? So it's like a bigger thing. Like, am I worthy of making an effort to be successful at something that I want to be successful at? And I was feeling not as successful as I wanted to be, and it, and that's kind of a bummer. But, I was talking to another comedian recently and they were saying, hey, we're all trying to be successful. We're all trying to grow. But as long as I'm having fun, that's the point of life's moments, is having fun. It's very true. Like that's successful living is living, successfully day to day, moment to moment. So I want to laugh. I want to make people laugh. Yeah.
And you know what? Like, one other thing that I think that this mini album, I think it will have a pretty good longevity, because every single thing that you've talked about here, every single joke that you've put down for this mini album, this is just like those questions that people have been thinking of asking themselves of not for the past like 10 or 20 years. Yeah, it's been even longer.
Right.
And I mean, at least one of these jokes, specifically the last one, can turn into the next trend.
Yeah.
Dude, all of those future potty parties, yeah, like potty training parties, they will be on you. You get that, yeah? You realize that.
I know. I feel like it's possible they may already exist. People may already be doing it out there, and we just don't know about it. But and part of being sort of the overconfidence of this album, and talking about how great it is, and making several predictions within the album. Like I'm on a date right now. I talk about predicting the dates. In the last track, I talk about predicting a trend of potty training birthday parties. And I even think this mini album, a 10-minute set that I've independently released online, I think that will also become a trend. Like, people are putting out their own specials. Why not put out a 10-minute special, a 15-minute special? It's, who's to say that you can't do it or shouldn't do it? And speaking of predictions, I do have goals for this. You talk about the longevity of it. Since I talk about the International Space Station in here, I do hope that this is someday listened to in space, maybe even on the International Space Station by an astronaut who's done shrooms or is on shrooms. Like, aim high is what I say, And I also want this album discussed in an academic setting, in some sort of university class about comedy. So yeah, I have those goals wrapped up in this.
So I guess that some people they just give their bodies after they pass away for the science. You will give your 10-minute mini album for that. Well, I mean, definitely from the at the very least from the linguistic point of view, there is a lot of things that you can actually discuss and analyze in this album. Because not only is everything structured nicely and perfectly, for me at least, yeah, you just wrote it so beautifully. If I caught myself thinking that there are some jokes that, and some comedians, if I could give like a particular example, Mitch Hedberg, yeah, if you write his jokes down and you just read them, you will not laugh. They're not funny. But when you watch him perform those jokes, that's what him and his way of writing makes you laugh. In this case, this would have made me laugh even if I read it. This is the thing. This is not only, I don't need to see a person perform this. I can read this and it would still be funny.
Yeah.
And this is and for me, this is so exciting because I very rarely get to see such examples, of a comedy bit that would be funny on paper, even on paper, not only on stage. And I think that this is what you were able to accomplish here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So
happy to share.
Yeah, thank you. So one more question, I guess, that I wanted to discuss with you. So you've talked about bringing some change to the world of comedy with like recording of such mini albums, doing the online shows and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Now that the world is actually starting to come back to normal life, probably by the beginning of the next year, the world would have been absolutely okay. Will have been absolutely okay. But do you see this trend of online comedy continuing in the future? And if yes, then how would it shape or how it will change in the future?
I definitely see virtual things continuing. It has been a silver lining and a gift. So why take that away from us now that we've, unlocked that? And I also think comedy itself will be changing. I think it will be sort of more gentler and honest, perhaps, and vulnerable, which is something that I think would be very useful to us. I have a lot of discussions with comedians who talk about being sort of like hard and edgy and rough and in your face, which sometimes is funny. Some people are more successful at that than others. But I think I think it's going to be just more sort of honest and truthful. A lot of the stuff I really try to write is the honest way I think about the world. I just came up with a joke earlier today, and it's that I talk about if I could choose any superpower, I would give myself the ability to turn into a dog. That way, because you could then go to the bathroom anywhere you want. Like you would never have those moments of like trying to find a bathroom,
And everyone would be perfectly fine with you, like urinating everywhere.
Sure.
Because you're a dog.
That's what dogs do. And that I at no point did I say a lie. I told a very truthful thought that I had, So I hope if comedy is an avenue towards healing in the earth, in society and civilization need healing, then I hope comedy is a bridge to really help move that along.
True words could not have been spoken, man. Like, really, I am so on board with this.
Yeah.
And finally, one last thing is I always ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of people who are thinking of or maybe wanting to try and do comedy, try to go on stage and maybe doubting themselves, should I do this, should I not? For those people who want to try and do stand-up comedy, what advice would you give to them?
I say go for it. I say that there needs to be more laughter in the world. I'm not a comedian who sort of urges people to not try. I try to be very encouraging because I do want more laughter in the world. And I also, maybe I can send you this link because I had so much time over these past few months. I did videotape some tutorials on how to write jokes. It's like how to comedy from the mind of a comedy stoner lessons, or stoner comedian lessons. So I can send you a link to those.
Oh, definitely, man. That would be awesome. It sounds like fun. Sounds like really good.
I think it's pretty funny, but it's also useful information on how to write jokes, how to turn stories into jokes.
Oh, thank you, man. And you know what? You send it to me. We will leave the link in the description of this podcast. I'll also leave the links to your mini album, The Best 10 Minutes of My Life, in the description of this episode. So you could, the audience members and the listeners of this podcast, you could guys go there and check out Shawn's mini album. Trust me, it is worth listening to and re-listening and then re-listening again and rethinking your entire life afterwards. So, man, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I've had a fantastic time talking to you. Hopefully that it will not be the last time because I really get the vibe there's so many questions I want to ask you, but time. But we're all limited by time.
We'll definitely talk again. Definitely. I had fun as well.
So thank you so much once again, man, for agreeing to do the show. Best of luck to you and to all the listeners who are listening to this or watching this on YouTube, guys. Thank you for watching and listening to this. Stay tuned. The next episode will be released next week and we'll be back with more comedy to you. Take care, guys. See ya.